Hi there. My name is Denise Becker, and I am an ex-Jehovah's Witness. This is really uncomfortable. I don't normally talk about this, and it's something that I've kept very private for a very long time. So my hope with sharing my experience and surviving living after the Jehovah's Witnesses is I really hope that I can help somebody either struggling with making the transitioning out, and then also creating a new life. So I've kind of called this finding the pieces after the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I think for people who have gone through this or in the process of it, I think it'll make a lot of sense. And what I'd like to do is a follow-up video for kind of some techniques that I continuously use. And also while I was in the process of putting this video together is it kind of reminded me of things that I need to kind of go back to, and they're just some basics, but really helps me to stay focused and grounded, which is really important during this transition because it's a lot, it's scary. But I do want to tell everybody who is considering leaving, or if you already have left, you are extremely courageous. And it shows a lot of strength. Maybe you don't feel that or you don't see that. My dog's right there. But I just want to acknowledge that for you. So I think that, just kind of briefly starting out, I was raised with the Jehovah's Witnesses. My family had converted when I was probably 6, and that would have been in 1971. So everybody knows what 1975 meant. And then by the time I graduated high school, I wound up getting disfellowshipped a year after that. So that would have been in 1984. I was reinstated after about 6 months. Supposedly that was super fast. And then I was disassociated about 2 years later. So we're talking about a good 30 years ago. But I think in the last couple of years, I've become more aware of the hold that the JW still had on me. And I've been able to kind of start to unravel that ball of yarn. I kind of think about something like that because it's real tedious and hard to kind of figure out where the starting point is or the end point. So my situation was a little bit more complex than that. And I'm sure that while I've always felt like I've been on an island by myself, I think that a lot of you probably would be able to relate to this. My family, there was domestic violence the entire time that I grew up, and it integrated with my stepfather. He was the abusive one. It integrated very nicely with the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about what I mean by that. One thing I do want to say is that the subject content of what I share is not for, I would say, anybody under 18, and it might get uncomfortable. So if that's the situation, you can just fast forward during those pieces. So I apologize in advance, but this is my experience, and it's been a lot to try to unravel over the years. And I just hope that I can help somebody not go through 30 extra years of pain and suffering and heartbreak. But there is hope, and that's really the message that I want to get at the end of this. So just kind of a Cliff Note story. My mom was a young single mom at 17 in the mid 60s when she had me. She was raised Mormon. Her family was very integrated into the Mormon religion. So that was a big no-no for the family. So that caused a lot of division in the family. And then she was excommunicated from the Mormon religion. So she was a single parent, and she had a shotgun wedding basically with my real father. And they were married for a year and then got divorced. And then I believe my real father went off to the Vietnam War for a couple years. So he really wasn't involved in my life in those really young years. But by the time I was probably 2.5, she had met the gentleman who eventually became my stepfather. What I can piece together is that pretty early on, by 2.5 for sure, he was beating me. And that's kind of been a lot to take in now that I have kids and, realize how vulnerable they are at that age. And I think what I've been able to piece together is that my mom had been beaten by him pretty early on in the relationship, because when he then did it with me, she didn't do anything to step in and protect me. So those are some family stories, and it's always the same story. And my sisters and I just were not the kind of kids that got in trouble. So the idea of beating your child so young is really hard for me to comprehend. So there was a lot of that domestic violence that was going on at a very young age. And then my mom and my stepfather got married, had 2 more girls. So those are the sisters that I refer to. So I grew up really young knowing that there was no escape. I learned that I had to be perfect so that I didn't cause any attention to come on me. And I also was very protective over my mom, because it was always her and me from such a young age. So I had to protect her. I knew pretty young about the financial situation that they were in, bankruptcies, and we're talking, I was 7, I think, and kind of having this understanding and always stressing out that we didn't have enough money for rent. We were going to get kicked out at the end of every month. Was there going to be enough food? Was there going to be enough for utilities? And our car always broke down. So this was kind of the familial situation that was happening from a very early age. I had become a perfectionist because I didn't want, to me, if anything were to go wrong, somebody was going to be in trouble, and it was going to be really bad. And typically he would beat my mom, but he would also beat us. And we were really little. He would hold our head between his knees, and he was a big man, and hold it. And I still remember the sting on my hand by, trying to protect myself. And it got to a point that my sisters and I would lose our faculties because it was so incredibly painful. And the black and blue marks were like a long stick. And they were pretty black after he was done, and it went back to the back of our knees. So we knew pretty quickly that we better never step out of line, because there would be hell to pay. So I don't remember, I was around 6. I don't remember us converting or studying the Bible. I just remember one day I kind of woke up and furniture was being moved out of our house. And again, we didn't have a lot. We didn't know if we were going to have to move out at the end of every month because of, our finances. So I just remember Jehovah's Witnesses, and we're not allowed to have personal possessions. And so I guess we were selling them, and like we had one couch and a bed for each of us, and somehow we were selling everything. And then I remember, just all these new rules. We couldn't be with our family, and they were everything to me. They were my safety, especially away from the craziness of my family. And they had unconditional love, but at home I was terrified all the time. And, we couldn't celebrate Christmas. We couldn't celebrate our birthdays. Everything was bad. The flag salute was bad. People were bad. And then there was this whole thing about the end of days, and, God's going to destroy the earth and people, and maybe if you're good enough, you'll live in the paradise earth. So as a 6 or 7-year-old, this was a lot of weight to try to understand. But then at home, I knew that if I screwed up, I could be beat, or eventually it became with my stepfather that he became more violent. he took an interest in guns, and so, you know, those were kind of used in the mix for the threats and the kind of, you know, at-home terror. So 1975 came and went, as we all know. Nothing happened. But looking back, I really feel that this was something that this environment really protected my stepfather. And it also gave him the confidence to do more and push the envelope more, because he knew that there was nothing that the elders were going to do. So in time, he threatened to shoot my mom a lot. He would take a gun into the bathroom, and if she wasn't towing the line for something, he would cock the gun and say that he was going to shoot her. You know, we were in the house. There was a time I came home from middle school or freshman in high school or something, and we kind of lived on the farm, so we had pigs and we had chickens and geese and that kind of thing. And came home one day, walked up the driveway, and every single chicken was dead, and they were all put into gunny sacks, and the gunny sacks were just completely soaked with blood. And I remember it was very surreal. Like, this really shouldn't be happening. But thank God it was the chickens and it wasn't us. And then everybody just went on their day. Nobody brought it up again. It was really interesting. It makes my heart beat really fast right now. There was a time that we came back from an assembly, and it may have been the weekend that I got baptized. I waited until I was older to get baptized, probably 15, maybe close to 16. And something happened between my mom and stepdad, and he didn't like the way that she was treating him or talking to him or something. So he pulled off on a country road, dirt country road, remote, got her out of the car in front, and said that if you know, to her, my mom, if you don't start talking to me, then I'm just going to shoot you right here in front of your girls. You know, so she got in the car and she snapped out of her, you know, her mood, whatever. There was also a situation where when I was, up until I was 8, I could only remember having my real dad visit me a handful of times. You know, and looking back on the situation, who knows what my mom and stepdad did to put barriers in there for, you know, for him to see me. So I don't know what that conversation was. But the long story short is that he gave up the parental right to me when I was 9, and my stepdad was able to adopt me, which means that my real dad gave up all parental rights. My last name changed, my identity changed. I did not look like this family that I was growing up with. I was the oddball out. And my real dad walked out of my life. And at that point, I knew that the last nail had been put in the coffin, so to speak. My whole life, I just visualized that I was in a dungeon, like medieval dungeon, way down in the center, at the core of the earth, and nobody was gonna know where I was or know how much help I needed. So it was a really lonely upbringing. It was very restricting. It was very confining. I felt like I was in jail, in a dungeon, you know, put away. There was a time that I call it my last meal, where my mom and my stepdad and my 2 sisters and I were out to dinner, and that was a rarity. That was a treat because we never had money. And I know I was driving because I think I drove to the restaurant, so I was at least 16, and I had bought my own car, so that would have been 17. I saved for my own car, and my stepdad said that, no, the waiter came and said, what do you guys want to order? And my stepdad started ordering for me, and I interrupted him. I cut him off, and I said very clearly that I would order for myself. Now, putting this in perspective, I had never put my foot down or spoke up or spoke out of turn ever, and especially to my stepfather. The tension was so incredibly thick, but I went ahead and I ordered my food, and I knew that that was my last meal. I knew that was my last supper, and that I was going to be literally killed that night when we got home. Years later, when my mom and I talked about it, she thought that she was going to be killed that night, and nothing happened. And I'm very thankful, I'm very fortunate that we didn't, but the fact that we even had to worry about that is just beyond, because that's not something that I have allowed to happen any time after that, or to my family or my children now. So what is ironic about this is that, I'll just interject this one point. After I got disfellowshipped, a lot of it was, I think, I was going out with one of the brothers for quite a while, and so, you know, it was leading up to getting married. He was very suffocating, he was very controlling, he reminded me a lot of my stepfather. And it got to a point where it was too much, and I did not want to live that way. And it didn't matter what the rules were or the expectations were, I was not going to live my mom's life. And I saw the writing on the wall. So I broke up with him right after the high school graduation. He got kind of ugly, and long story short, he wound up meeting another girl in a month, and they got engaged. So broke my heart, was absolutely devastating. But it was what it was, and I just became more and more determined that I wasn't going to, I needed to get out. And for years I had made the promise to myself that whatever it took, I was going to save as much money as I could with my little part-time job, and I was going to get the hell out of my house, because there was no one that was making it better. And for some reason I didn't count on the elders to, but I kind of did. I just always assumed that they were always doing the right thing for me. So after I broke up, sorry, that was my son. So after I graduated high school and just really focused on getting a job and working full time, this really went against the rules in terms of, you know, pioneering. But that's really why it took me so long to get baptized, because I just didn't feel like it was the right thing. I always had this deep gut feeling, and, you know, I kept waiting for, you know, God and I to have this amazing relationship, and it didn't happen. He didn't speak to me. I didn't have a great revelation. I didn't have any solace. I didn't have any support. I just really didn't understand what was happening. And I think just after graduating, and then I started to work full time, and then I was kind of involved in living outside of that bubble that we had. I kind of started maybe to see things in a contrasting way. And I wound up working on this big real estate deal, and it was around the holidays. So this was like the year after, the end of the year that I graduated high school. And so I wound up working till like 2 a.m. for weeks and weeks. And it was just a crazy thing. And I was able to really like put all of my energy in this. I was of value, and I was only like 17, 18 years old, had no formal education. I just graduated high school, had no world experience at all. And people found value in me, and I had a great attitude and a great work ethic, and it went far. I mean, people noticed it. It was really interesting, because I was used to being just in the background, not causing any problems, and have no opinion, and, you know, no ideas at all to interject. So one of the attorneys that I wound up working with, he was from the East Coast, and he was such a different personality than I had ever seen. So, you know, we had a lot of downtime, and so he was asking me, you know, what my family does, and, you know, the whole thing, and we got into the whole Jehovah's Witness thing. And his East Coast personality came out, and just really challenged me on my beliefs, and he basically said it was just all a crock of shit and a bunch of BS. I mean, there was no training in any of the meetings for this, so it just really took me back. And I think just it was kind of this perfect storm happening, and it started really getting me to question, like, what is this all about? I'm starting to see all this hypocrisy and conflict, and things aren't really what I thought they were and had been taught all this time. And what is really going on? So it was just a really, really weird time. And I was the kind of kid and person that did everything by the book. I never, if somebody were to say, stand on one foot and hop for the next hour and only stand at one spot, I would have done it. So this was really the first time that I'd ever really stepped out of line in any way. And just the fact that I was working full time, and I was talking to worldly people, that was really unbelievable. So as it turned out, this individual and I, we had a relationship, an intimate relationship, and I kind of was at a point where I was just like, I was done with everything. There was things that just didn't make any sense to me, and I didn't have anybody to trust or rely on. So there was a lot of guilt in that, and I still lived at home, and I never kept anything from my mom, and this was a big secret, to harbor. And I did everything by the rules, and so this was a big no-no. And how do I handle this? So I had finally broken down, and I told my mom. It was eating me alive, and she basically said that she was going to have to turn me into the elders. That really pulled the rug out from under me. And especially she had been a single mom when she went against the religion, at a time when that was just a big no-no, in the mid 60s. And I just felt really betrayed. So I just told her, I said, you know what, I'll do this myself, because I didn't want anything taken out of context. So I called I'm totally feel like I'm going to throw up right now. So I called the elders, for a meeting. And as we all know, there's 3 elders. They're all men. So I'm in this all by myself, in this little room with them, and they're taking notes. And so there's some record of me somewhere, and they ask very intimate personal questions, like how often, what exactly did you do? How did it start? Where were you touched? Did you reciprocate? It was so inappropriate, but I didn't know that I could say that, and it would just absolutely blows me away is the assumed rules, and they're not written down, but we all somehow know them, and we all absorb them into our fibers. So I just sat there and I answered the questions, but I was really, really uncomfortable. And I felt like I was kind of being raped a little bit, but I felt like I didn't have any rights. It was a really interesting position to be in. So they asked me if I felt bad, and I told them no. I said, I feel the same person. I'm not sorry for what I did. And that was really the first of my real questioning things. So they kind of were, taken aback, because they had known me for so long and I wasn't this personality. But thankfully this personality was starting to emerge and just question. So I was disfellowshipped. They announced it to 2 congregations in my little town that was about a total of 500 people. So they said that I could work to get back into, the Jehovah's Witnesses, but it would take a long, long time. And they said probably at least a year, because nobody had done it, in a shorter time. So, those of us who have been rejected, disfellowship, shun. We all know how this is, and it is absolutely devastating. So here I'm just out of high school. My mom told me that I had to move out if I didn't try to get back in. Where was I gonna go? I was barely making any money, even working full time. Sorry, that was another family member. So I really didn't have any options. So I conceded to get back, and running into people that I had grown up with in town. Like I remember being at a grocery store, and we came at the end of the aisles in the grocery store, and they stopped, and they just were in shock, and they turned around and ran the other way. So there was a lot of that. It was very demeaning. And when I would go into the Kingdom Hall, when I was disfellowshipped, I knew exactly what time to go in, sit down, and I knew exactly when to leave so that I wouldn't have to run into anybody. But when I did kind of run into somebody as I was trying to get to a seat, there was a lot of looking down at the ground, at the, the ceiling, this kind of thing. So as it turned out, I think I was reinstated within 6 months. I was there at every single meeting. Everybody saw me. And I remember when they were announcing it that they had admonished the Kingdom Hall to not applaud. That there was still a long way to go to prove my worth, even though they didn't mention my name at that moment. And when they mentioned my name, the entire place erupted, and it wouldn't stop. So that it was such a weird place to be so demeaned and belittled and ignored, to all of a sudden having this open, applause. It was just an emotional roller coaster. What that really told me in some regards is that people feel like they have to do this, even though this is probably going against every fiber of their being. And it's just such a horrible place that people are put into. So I had moved out with another, a pioneer friend of mine, and being out on my own, I think, and I was still working full time. I just really started to see that there was a whole other life out there that we were never allowed to touch. And it was at a point where I had heard so many times that I was tall and thin, that I should be a model, and I honestly thought I was the most ugliest person on earth. So I kind of was, I had this rebellious streak kind of going. So I enrolled in a modeling studio in San Francisco, and I got some attention. It wasn't anything to make me this, huge, fashion model or anything like that. And this is before any of the reality shows. So I did the big fashion show, and some of my JW friends wanted to know where was I going on Saturday. I wasn't out door to door, and they found out I was doing this modeling school, and they promised that they were going to come and protest me. So that was fun worrying about that. They did not show up, so I did this big fashion show. It was really cool. I was absolutely scared to death, and I wound up getting 5 callbacks from agencies from, I think, San Francisco and LA. So that's pretty big. And there was agencies, I think, from Europe that were there. So it was pretty big. So I, I knocked their socks off with my pictures and, my presentation and everything on stage. And I show up the next day looking like Laura Ingalls. I'm sorry, Laura Ingalls in Little House on the Prairie, but you clearly couldn't take the JW out of me. So nobody asked for a contract. So I think that was pretty funny. But it's an industry that I would have no interest in at all. It's very cutthroat. But that just shows that, that JW piece just was so ingrained. I had my ruffles shirt up, and my blouse was all buttoned up here, and my Little House on the Prairie skirt, probably flats or something. So I just have to laugh. But around this time, I had gone to visit my mom, and her face was completely beat up. It was all black and blue. I'm surprised she still had her teeth. This, you know, seeing this made me incredibly angry. So I had, she showed me a room, and the whole room was destroyed. My stepdad had taken a mallet or something and just absolutely smashed everything that she had. And I asked her, and I'm sure I had asked her this before, but for some reason it really resonated, is why didn't you go to the elders? And she told me, she said, there's no use because they tell me I need to go home and be a better wife so I don't get beat. That was the end of that. The bottom of my world fell out. I realized then that everything that I had supported and fought for and believed in and relied on and trusted were all lies. Who as a person allows that to happen? So what that meant was they knew for years what he had been doing to us, and nobody did the right thing. In addition, there was child molestation with one of my sisters, and that's not a story for me to tell. And supposedly there was another brother that was involved, and my stepdad would go on these hunting trips with men, brothers, and he would take my sister, and she was a young girl. That was so inappropriate. And I'll just leave it at that. So this particular day when I saw my mom's face black and blue, my stepdad had moved out, and I think he had owned his own apartment, and he had come over and did this to her. So I went over to meet him, and I'm just going to share this with you. This is part of my story. So again, I did everything I was supposed to. I followed the rules. I towed the line. I never spoke out. I never had an opinion. So I asked to meet him at his apartment, and I walked in, and everything was brand new furniture, brand new pictures on the wall. I had never seen anything brand new, ever. And we had always struggled. The only time I can remember going to clothes shopping was the Goodwill. And other than that, my mom just kept adding laces on the bottom of my pants every year. Thankfully, I always stayed really small and skinny. But my stepdad always had the money for the things he wanted. Big, deep diving trips on these huge boats, hunting trips, the latest and greatest. And I never even questioned it growing up. It's like, why do we not have anything? Why do we wonder where our food's coming from when he has all this? And during that period of time is when he was started to collect guns. And, you know, his drinking got really worse and worse over time. He got into, I think, porn. He was maritally raping my mom on a regular, probably daily basis. And when we interrupted anything, he would get very angry. He also would come home with pedigree hunting dogs. And they'd be around for a couple months, and then they would just be gone. So I would just always assume that he took them back to the breeder. Well, I found out years later he had been taking the dogs out when he was tired of them and shooting them dead. To understand that as an adult, that was pretty shocking. But I am so grateful that it wasn't us. I just am really sad that we had to go through all this. So by the time I was 21 or something, I had moved out with somebody from work, and I cut ties off with the JWs, and the elders reached out to me to see if I would change my mind, and I said absolutely not. And, you know, again, I didn't have a voice. I didn't explain. I don't remember if that I explained why, and, you know, how everything had been a lie. And they were my only hope, and they didn't do anything, and they had this information. So I just didn't want anything to do with it. My mom at this time had told me that she couldn't have anything to do with me because of my choice. And if I was in a, like a deadly accident, then, let her know. But other than that, she couldn't be there for me. And then one of my sisters left a note on my door, basically that, too bad, so sad for me that I was making a really bad choice and that I was going to be the one to miss out and lose out. So moving on and living in a world that I was not prepared for, had no idea. And, keep in mind, this is before social media. There was no way to connect. And how could I connect with apostate people or worldly people? They're all bad people. And I was so far behind in my maturity and understanding just how the world works. I was an emotional wreck. I had just gotten this new job and I was working for a senior partner in a prestigious law firm. And I sat right outside of his office, and all I would come to work with this big heavy sweater, and I would just sob all day long, and I could barely keep it together. And how they did not let me go is beyond me. But it was, and I couldn't talk about it. People would ask, and I just couldn't talk about it because what was I going to say? I got disfellowshipped, and this religion is bad. I mean, you weren't allowed to talk about it. So there's just all these secrets to hold and bear. And it was a lot. And I was extremely depressed because my friend group with the Jehovah's Witness, my only friend group, because you couldn't have friends in school, we were very social, and we always got together and saw each other. So I had nothing. And I really craved that, social aspect. And I didn't have a relationship with my family, my grandparents and things, because we cut them out. So it was a really hot mess. It was absolutely devastating. It was the worst time of my life. It was utter heartbreak. It was a lot of pain and loss and rejection. And not knowing who to trust. There was no way for me to connect. Everybody was bad. So I'm really happy for those who do leave now, because you do have social media to connect with, and you at least have that. It was the lowest point of my life, and it was the only time that I ever considered suicide. And I really didn't realize all of this experience until I've been on social media. I think I've finally gotten on in the 6 months, because, my whole time it was bad, to connect with anybody who's been through this experience. So reading people's experience, their testimonies, their feelings, hits home. So that's why I want to just say that, you are very courageous and you're doing the right thing. There is hope. I have a full life. I actually graduated UCLA. And believe me, it was by the skin of my teeth. It took me 10 years. And there was just always something holding me down from completing that. And I would feel like I would need to throw up. And I understand now that it was the JW rule of that college was bad, even after all these years. I am married. I have 2 beautiful children that are, college bound. And my husband has put up with a lot with me, because there's a lot of just things that I would react to that I just didn't understand. Like every July, when that's my birthday month, it comes around, the entire month, I would just be a complete mess. And come to find out, I have an understanding now that I felt, because that's what I was taught when I first became a Jehovah's Witness at such a young age, that, you know, if you celebrate these holidays, you're going to die. God's going to kill you. So I'm starting to understand that now. And, you know, part of this is, you know, complex trauma with the domestic violence, living with it. And especially it started before 5, but also having this religious component that also protected that as well. And then adding on to the trauma that, you know, if you don't toe the line and follow the rules, that God is going to also kill you. So there were a lot of really strict rules that, you know, I grew up with, and I'm sure many of you could relate to this on some level. And then to come to find out that it really doesn't exist. It's all a farce. You know, Christmas has always been really hard. Not as bad as my birthday. So I wonder if maybe I became a Jehovah's Witness in July. But holidays are just really uncomfortable for me. Halloween is, because we always had to hide. You know, trick-or-treaters would come around and pretend like we're not home. So I'm having, after 30 some years, I'm having an understanding of this happening. So I'm able to start putting the pieces together and start to make peace with it. And so that's been a long road, but, you know, I've learned that it's been hard anyway. So, and if I'm working on it and I actually have a plan to handle those trauma feelings and aftermath, there's actually benefits and positive experiences that come out of it. So I just want to encourage you guys, you know, when you guys are having these really low moments, that there is hope. There's ways to handle this. And so my follow-up video, when I'm kind of not as emotional right now, I want to be able to put those things, you know, on a video and kind of walk through those things. And there's some just really, really basic things, but I think can really help put some things in perspective and kind of maybe give you some peace. And if you're not at a place that you're able to welcome that right now, that's okay. Come back to it later on. I've really, you know, pushed away a lot when, you know, my therapist has said that, you know, the JWs had a lot to do with my trauma. And even at that point, up until 2 years ago, I was protecting them. And no, that can't be anything. I've dealt with that, and, you know, I've moved on, and it really is been integrated into all of this. You know, so me articulating my experience, I do not want to have, this is not meant to put anybody down, be disrespectful in any way to any individual or group, but I have to be true to myself. This is my experience. And I feel like sharing it would be something that could be beneficial. If it's not just to one person, hopefully many. I would love to have your comments on here. Is this, you know, maybe something that you're looking through? Tell me that you've gone through the same thing. And, you know, and feel free to share this as well. So this is the real deal. I think you guys can understand, and, you know, there's not many people that can understand this as well. So this is something that I keep really private, because people just do not get the depth of, you know, what it was like. So I feel like I'm finally been freed out of the dungeon. I don't see dark images. I don't see that I'm stuck in a box like I have most of my life. And where I found peace and solace is I am working with a trauma specialized therapist who has diagnosed me with complex trauma, PTSD, and disassociation. And I'm not talking about the JWs, disassociation. So I've come to understand that most of my life, I have completely just blocked everything out that was happening. But what happens is your body still goes through that trauma and that fear and the terror. So what happens is, if things are even similar that might happen, your body reacts to that. And your mind is saying, what's going on? Or somebody else is having a reaction. And I mean, it got to a point where I would have tremors. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I never really had any symptoms where I actually got physically sick. I feel like I've aged really fast. It's been a lot of stress on my body that way. But I know that some people, you know, they get physically sick. So I'm hoping that, you know, in time, these symptoms, I'm actually sharing that these symptoms can actually be reduced, your stress level. And I know that when I'm starting to get symptoms of something, so I have a kind of before and after plan that can kind of help minimize the duration of that, so that it doesn't go on for as long as it's gone before, where I'm dealing with it for like a week. So maybe now it's a couple hours. So those are things I'll go over in my next video, because if anything, I'd like to share some things, you know, things that can be done immediately, and you always have something to refer back to, you know, until you kind of are able to maybe work through more of the details in this way. So again, my name is Denise Becker. I understand every step of the way that whether you're curious, physically and mentally out, or the opposite, I was getting confused, but you know what I'm talking about, or if you've actually stepped out and you've left loved ones behind. I've been there. And eventually all of my loved ones left, and some of my very close friends left. So, and including somebody whose family was the governing body. And he left his family, that is the governing body. So, you know, I'll just share that there's some very courageous people who have left. And again, we're not in the end of days. You know, humankind has been leaving messes behind for centuries. So we're in a complete hot mess these days, but we're not at the JW end of days. So, I can just confirm that. 1975 never came and went, but it terrified me. So I hope this has helped in some way. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing any responses that you have or any questions that you might have. All right? Have a great day, guys.